Welcome back to All Things Soggy Buns.
All right.
Today, we're firing up the grill and diving deep into the world of podcasts. You shared some research on starting a podcast.
I did.
And we're going to break down what makes them sizzle.
Ooh, I like that.
And how you can cook up your own successful show.
Well, what's fascinating is just the sheer growth of podcast listenership.
Okay.
I mean, it's doubled in the past decade, and over half of U.S. consumers are now regular podcast listeners.
Okay, so we're talking about a serious appetite for audio content.
Good time.
But here's the thing that really got my attention. There's actually a lot less competition in podcasting compared to blogs or YouTube.
That's right.
Really?
Think of it like this. If you wanted to open another burger joint
Right.
in a city already saturated with them,
Yeah.
it would be tough to stand out.
For sure.
But in podcasting, you have more room to find your niche and cultivate a loyal audience.
So how do we go from a spark of an idea to a podcast that people actually crave?
Yeah.
The research highlighted some common traits of successful podcasts and used a popular example, the Joe Rogan experience.
Yeah, now Rogan's show might not be everybody's cup of tea,
Right.
but you can't deny his success.
Nope.
And a lot of that comes down to a few key ingredients.
Okay.
He's genuinely passionate about the topics that he covers. He has a clear focus, and he makes it all about the listener,
Right.
but it goes beyond that. Consistency and that personal touch are really what sets him apart.
Yeah, and just like with Soggy Buns, it's not just about Toby and Ola's mouth-watering Maryland-style BBQ. It's the whole experience.
Right.
They've built a community around their food truck and catering service.
Yeah.
People feel like they're part of something special.
Exactly. It's that human connection that builds loyalty, whether it's a podcast or a food truck.
Speaking of Soggy Buns.
Oh, yeah.
If you're in Maryland and haven't tried their BBQ yet, what are you waiting for?
I know.
Check them out at soggybuns.com. That's B-U-N-Z with a Z. They've got all the details on their menu locations and catering options.
Now, before you grab your microphone and start recording,
Okay.
let's talk about planning.
Okay.
It might not be the most glamorous part of podcasting, but it's crucial.
So we're talking about more than just deciding on a catchy name and hitting record.
Right.
Okay.
Think of it like Toby and Ola crafting their BBQ sauce.
Okay.
They didn't just throw random ingredients together.
Okay.
They experimented, they refined their recipe, and they perfected their process.
Yeah.
And that's what you need to do with your podcast.
Gotcha.
Define your goals,
Uh-huh.
figure out who your ideal listener is, and decide what format best suits your style and content.
I was surprised by the different formats. Solo shows, co-hosted interviews, panels, even scripted storytelling. There's a whole menu of options.
Yeah, and each format comes with its own flavor and considerations.
Okay.
A solo show lets you share your expertise directly,
Right.
while a co-hosted format can bring in different perspectives and create a fun dynamic. Interviews offer a platform for sharing other people's stories,
Uh-huh.
while panels allow for deeper discussions,
Right.
and scripted storytelling is a whole other beast,
Okay.
perfect for those who love to weave narratives and build fictional worlds.
So it's like choosing the right cut of meat for your BBQ. You wouldn't use brisket for pulled pork, right?
You got it.
You need to pick the format that best showcases your content and your strengths.
Exactly.
Okay.
And speaking of strengths, let's talk about episode length.
Right?
There's a sweet spot for podcast episodes,
What?
and it's shorter than you might think,
Sure.
20 to 40 minutes.
Wow.
This length accounts for a whopping 31% of all podcasts out there.
That's interesting. Why do you think that is?
Well, think about how people listen to podcasts.
Okay.
They're often multitasking, commuting, working out, doing chores.
Right.
A shorter episode fits into those pockets of time perfectly.
Right.
It respects the listener's time and leaves them wanting more.
Okay, so we've got our plan, our format, and our ideal episode length. What's next? How do we actually start creating these bite-sized audio masterpieces?
Good question.
The source dove deep into the importance of scripting.
It's all about having a roadmap for your episode.
Right.
Even if you're not reading word for word from a script, a strong outline keeps you on track,
Okay.
ensures a smooth flow, and helps you deliver your message effectively.
So it's like Toby and Ola prepping their ingredients before they fire up the grill. They chop, marinate, and organize everything so that when the heat is on, they can focus on the cooking.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And just like with BBQ, having the right tools is essential for a successful podcast. And in this case, your most important tool is a quality microphone.
I get it. We can't serve up a delicious audio experience if the sound is muffled or distorted.
Right.
What else should we keep in mind?
The source also emphasized finding the right recording space.
Okay.
You don't need a fancy studio,
Right.
but you do need a quiet environment with minimal background noise.
Gotcha.
Even a walk-in closet can do wonders. Seriously, a closet.
You'd be surprised how effective it can be.
Really?
The clothes act as natural sound absorbers,
Wow.
creating a more controlled recording environment.
Cool.
It's like having your own mini studio.
Okay, I'm learning so much already, and I can't wait to dive into the next layer, adding music designing, cover art, and the whole world of inviting guests onto the show.
All that good stuff.
But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's take a break.
Welcome back to All Things Soggy Buns. Before the break, we were talking about the importance of planning your podcast, choosing the right format, and setting yourself up for recording success with a decent microphone and a quiet space, even if that means turning your closet into a makeshift studio.
I love the idea of a closet studio.
Yeah.
It's like that DIY spirit that Toby and Ola embody with their food truck.
Right.
They started with a simple concept and turned it into something amazing through hard work and creativity.
Exactly. And speaking of turning passion into something more, let's talk about monetizing your podcast. Yeah.
You've put in the work, you've built an audience now. How do you turn those downloads into dollars?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
It's one thing to create a podcast for the love of it, but the possibility of generating income certainly adds another layer of motivation.
Absolutely. And the good news is that there are multiple paths you can explore. One of the most common is advertising, similar to what you hear on traditional radio.
But do podcast ads really work? I feel like listeners have more control these days. They can easily skip ahead or tune out if they're not interested.
That's a fair point, but research shows that podcast listeners are actually quite receptive to ads, especially if they're relevant to their interests and integrated well into the content.
Okay.
They see it as a way to support the creators they enjoy, especially if the podcast is free.
So it's like a win-win.
Yeah,
Listeners get great content and creators get compensated for their hard work.
exactly.
But it sounds like there's an art to incorporating ads without disrupting the flow or alienating listeners.
You're absolutely right. It's about finding the right balance. Instead of just dropping a generic ad in the middle of your episode, you can consider sponsored segments where you seamlessly integrate a brand's message into your content.
Okay, that sounds much more organic and less intrusive. The source also mentioned affiliate marketing,
Right.
which I've mostly heard about in the context of blogs and websites.
Yeah.
How does that translate to podcasting?
It works in a similar way. You recommend products or services that align with your podcast's theme.
Okay.
And if your listeners make a purchase through your unique affiliate link, you earn a commission.
Gotcha.
Think of it like Toby recommending a specific brand of charcoal or smoker because he genuinely believes in its quality.
Yeah.
It's a recommendation coming from a trusted source.
Makes sense. People are more likely to try something if it's endorsed by someone they already follow and respect.
Precisely. It's all about building that trust and credibility over time. Now, let's shift gears to another monetization method that's gaining popularity: paid subscriptions.
This is where listeners pay a recurring fee to access exclusive content, right?
Right.
Kind of like a VIP pass to the podcast.
Exactly. It could be bonus episodes, behind-the-scenes content, early access to new releases, or even direct interaction with the hosts. Platforms like Patreon have made it really easy to set up these subscription tiers and manage your community of paying members.
It's like creating a closer-knit community within your larger audience.
Yeah.
A space for superfans to connect and get even more value from the podcasts they love.
And it allows creators to diversify their income streams and build a more sustainable business model. It's not just relying on ads, but fostering a direct relationship with listeners who are truly invested in supporting your work.
This all sounds incredible, but I imagine it takes a lot of time and effort to reach a point where you can actually make a decent living from podcasting.
Like any endeavor, it requires dedication, consistency, and a willingness to learn and adapt. But the beauty of podcasting is its accessibility. You don't need a fancy studio or a huge budget to get started. You can start small, experiment, and grow organically.
I'm getting fired up just thinking about all the possibilities. Maybe a podcast about the art of BBQ, the stories behind different regional styles, and interviews with pitmasters from around the country.
Cool.
We could even have Toby and Ola on as our first guests.
Now that's an episode I would definitely subscribe to. And speaking of soggy buns, if you're in Maryland and haven't experienced their mouth-watering BBQ yet, head over to soggybuns.com, that's B-U-N-Z with a Z, to find their locations. And menu, trust me, Your taste buds will thank you.
Okay.
But for now, let's get back to the topic at hand.
All right.
We've talked about ads, affiliate marketing, and paid subscriptions. There's one more monetization avenue we should touch on: donations.
Right. This is where listeners can directly support creators through platforms like PayPal or Ko-Fi, right?
Yeah.
It's like saying, hey, I love your work. Here's a virtual tip to keep the good stuff coming.
Precisely. It's a great way for listeners to show their appreciation and contribute to the sustainability of podcasts they enjoy. It's especially common for independent creators or those who choose not to run ads. It's a direct vote of confidence from the audience.
So it's like a virtual tip jar, but for amazing audio content.
Yeah.
It really fosters a sense of community and shared ownership between creators and listeners.
Exactly. And speaking of community, we've covered the business side of podcasting, but let's not forget about the heart of it all: building a loyal and engaged audience. That's where the real magic happens.
It's like Toby and Ola building a community around their food truck. People line up not just for the delicious BBQ, but for the experience, a connection, the feeling of being part of something special.
That's a perfect analogy. And building that kind of community around your podcast is essential for long-term success. It's not just about broadcasting your message. It's about fostering two-way communication, creating a space where listeners feel valued, heard, and connected.
But how do we do that in a medium where we can't actually see or interact with our listeners in real time?
That's where creativity and strategy come. In the source highlighted several ways to engage your audience, both within the podcast itself and beyond.
Okay. I'm all ears. Share the secrets to building a thriving podcast community.
Well, first and foremost, it starts with your podcast itself.
Okay.
Use your intro and outro to directly address your listeners.
Right.
Ask them questions. Encourage them to share their thoughts, their stories, their feedback. Let them know that you're not just talking at them, but that you genuinely want to hear from them.
It's like breaking the fourth wall and acknowledging that there are real people on the other side of those headphones eager to connect and engage with the content.
Exactly. And it's not just about talking at them. It's about genuinely wanting to hear their thoughts, their feedback, and even their own stories. You're creating a shared experience, a dialogue, a sense that you're all on this podcast journey together.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's like gathering around a campfire, sharing stories and connecting with like-minded people. But how do we extend that engagement beyond the podcast itself?
That's where social media comes in. Create a dedicated page or group for your podcast where listeners can connect, share their thoughts, ask questions, and interact with each other. You can use social media to share behind-the-scenes content teasers for upcoming episodes, and even polls and Q&A sessions to get your audience involved.
It's like extending the conversation beyond the audio format,
Right.
making it more visual, interactive, and dynamic. It's also a great way to connect with potential guests, collaborate with other creators, and expand your reach.
Precisely. Social media is a powerful tool for building a community around your podcast. But let's not forget about one of the simplest yet most effective ways to encourage engagement: asking your listeners to leave reviews and ratings on podcast platforms.
It's like giving a restaurant a 5-star review. If you love the food and service, it helps others discover the place and shows the owners that you appreciate their hard work.
Exactly. Reviews and ratings act as mini endorsements, boosting your podcast's visibility and credibility. It's social proof that your podcast is worth checking out.
I'm starting to see how all these pieces fit together. Content creation, monetization, and engagement. They're all interconnected and essential for building a successful podcast.
It's a holistic approach. You need to nurture all these aspects to create a thriving podcast that resonates with listeners and achieves your goals, whatever those may be. And speaking of achieving goals, there's one crucial ingredient we haven't talked about yet, and that's now.
Welcome back to All Things Soggy Buns. We've been smoking this podcasting topic for a while now, and I'm really getting a taste for how much goes into creating a successful show.
We've covered a lot of ground, from planning and production to monetization and engagement. But like a perfectly smoked brisket, there are still a few layers to uncover.
So what's the secret ingredient that takes a podcast from good to great? What are we missing?
Well, it's not just one ingredient. It's a combination of factors. But one we haven't touched on yet is consistency.
Yeah, right. Just like Toby and Ola consistently serve up mouthwatering, BBQ, a successful podcast, needs to deliver on its promise week after week, episode after episode.
It's about establishing a rhythm, building trust with your listeners, and letting them know they can count on you for a regular dose of whatever delicious audio goodness you're serving up.
Yeah, consistency can be tough, though.
Yeah.
Life gets in the way, motivation fluctuates, and sometimes it's hard to find the time and energy to keep churning out content.
That's where having a clear schedule and sticking to it as much as possible becomes crucial. Treat your podcast like a standing appointment with your listeners, something they can anticipate and look forward to.
It's like tuning into your favorite TV show. Back in the day, you knew when to expect a new episode and you wouldn't miss it for the world.
And that predictability is what builds loyalty and turns casual listeners into devoted fans. Of course, consistency is just one piece of the puzzle. Let's talk about the actual content of your episodes. No matter how consistent you are, if your content isn't engaging, listeners will eventually tune out.
So how do we make sure our podcast is something people actually want to listen to?
It starts with a strong narrative. Even if you're not telling a fictional story, every podcast episode should have a clear beginning, middle, and end. It should take listeners on a journey, whether that's exploring a particular topic, interviewing a fascinating guest, or sharing personal experiences.
So it's like crafting a delicious BBQ meal. You start with quality ingredients, carefully prepare them, and combine them in a way that creates a flavorful and satisfying experience.
That's a great analogy. And just like with BBQ, there are certain techniques you can use to enhance your podcast narrative. Think about pacing variety and incorporating elements like music and sound effects to create a more immersive experience.
So it's not just about the words we speak, but how we use our voices, the sounds we incorporate, and the overall flow of the episode to create something truly captivating.
Exactly. It's about taking your listeners on an audio adventure that keeps them engaged from start to finish. And speaking of taking listeners on a journey, let's talk about a specific format that relies heavily on strong narratives, the podcast interview.
Yes, the art of the podcast interview. It's such a dynamic format, offering the opportunity to tap into other people's stories, expertise, and perspectives.
The key to a successful podcast interview is preparation research. Your guests thoroughly understand their background and come prepared with thoughtful questions that will spark engaging conversation.
It's like showing up to a BBQ party with a dish that complements the main course. You want to contribute something meaningful and add to the overall experience.
That's a great way to put it. And during the interview, it's all about active listening, asking follow-up questions, and being genuinely curious about your guests' responses.
It's a delicate balance of guiding the conversation while also allowing it to flow naturally and explore unexpected tangents.
And don't be afraid to inject your own personality into the interview. Let your enthusiasm and curiosity shine through creating a relaxed and engaging atmosphere for both you and your guest.
This deep dive has been incredible. We've explored so many facets of podcasting, and I'm feeling inspired and ready to take on this audio adventure myself.
And remember, no matter where you are in your podcasting journey, there's always more to learn and explore. The world of podcasting is constantly evolving, so embrace the challenge, experiment, and most importantly, have fun.
And speaking of fun, if you're in Maryland and looking for a delicious and fun culinary experience, be sure to check out Toby and Ola at Soggy Buns. That's soggybuns.com, B-U-N-Z, with a Z. Their Maryland-style BBQ is a true taste sensation, and they even offer catering for your next event.
That's a wrap on this episode of All Things Soggy Buns. We hope you found this deep dive into podcasting informative and inspiring. Until next time, happy podcasting.
Thanks for listening to All Things Soggy Buns.